I had a dream a couple days ago that it was like the apocalypse, but I mean, it wasn't really. It was just like everyone was like, it's the apocalypse, guys. But it was like a house party, and everyone was just like, well, the world's ended. From what I could tell, like, things were still mostly fine, but just like the internet was down and power was down. But it was like everyone had gotten together, and it was almost just like everyone was like, anyway, catch you later. Good luck in the apocalypse. You know, and then I went out and I got on my bike with a couple of friends. I was like, I'll catch you later, you know, good luck. And I'm like, I'll probably never see them again. But, you know, it was a nice day. It was like a pleasant spring evening, but like all the power was out. And we were like, all right, I guess we'll go fend for ourselves. But the first couple of days of the apocalypse were probably pretty nice.
I think if you had definitive proof, definitive confirmation that the world was ending, I think people would just go apeshit and probably just have fun because you don't have a choice.
There's apocalypse and apocalypse, though, because this wasn't really the apocalypse. This was just like the collapse of society, and that's no fun. Like, meteor hitting the Earth is like everything is fine, and then the meteor hits the Earth. But then it's like what we were facing and what we're facing in real life is like society's systems collapse, but like the planet still exists. So you're not going to die, but you have to like learn how to survive and maybe like get out of the city and find food and shit.
Okay, so you won't die, but you have to get really into like agriculture.
Yeah, and if there's like a day's worth of food in the city before everybody starts eating each other. So it's a tough. And the toilet paper, it's gone.
That's probably going to be the least of my worries.
I think it's the thing I'll miss. Toilet paper and
I'm reading
hot
a
showers.
book at the moment called The Indifferent Stars Above, which is a chronicle of the Donner Party. And it's an incredibly interesting story. And it is, as it says on the cover of the book, which I'll show you, the harrowing saga of a Donner Party bride.
So you know what you're into. It's not the wacky adventures of a Donner Party bride.
I think it might have been fun at some times, but there would have been a cutoff point where stuff would have got real bad all the time.
Guys, I was told this was a party.
It is interesting that you talked about having an apocalyptic dream, because that does obviously relate to the episode. So maybe this episode gave you this dream, but that's spoiling the ending. So, well, Tom Lang, welcome to Reanimates.
Thanks for having me back.
I don't know if there's anything in common between the two TV shows that you've done apart from Jeffrey Combs being in them.
I think that's the theme of your podcast, right? That's the only thing in common.
You've nailed it.
I've detected a pattern.
Obviously, the last one was Perversions of Science, which was science-y. This one, I would argue, is a little science-y, considering medicine is a science.
In the last one, Jeffrey Combs was straight up a bad dude, and in this one, he's not really a bad dude.
There's no villain in this, I would say.
No. The only villain is the Twilight Zone.
Well, excellent segue there. You did it better than I could have. We are doing the Twilight Zone, the 2000s reboot of the Twilight Zone, an episode called The Placebo Effect. And that's not how you feel when you're listening to alt-rock band Placebo.
Oh,
do you think that every time we say Placebo Effect in this episode, I should play a little sting of a Placebo song? I think that would be really funny and not at all annoying.
Annoyingly, I'm now racking my brains for the titles of any Placebo songs, and I'm not confident enough that I would get them right. But if I did, there'd be some great puns happening right now.
Imagine the jokes. But oh well.
I'd do Spider Bait or something by accident. Oh, Firestarter, that was Placebo.
No, it wasn't.
Damn it! What did Placebo do?
Placebo, okay, you're thinking of The Prodigy.
I'm thinking of
Placebo
Prodigy.
did Every You, Every Me, and Pure Morning.
Yes.
And Special K.
Yep. I got it now. They were angsty late 90s.
Yeah, very angsty. There's been a few reboots of Twilight Zone since the original series in the early 60s. A show which is genuinely one of my all-time favourite media properties of all time. Like, I will never get sick of the original Twilight Zone episodes. They're so good.
Well, it was super influential.
Yeah, it's ridiculous how many things have either directly ripped off or been influenced by Twilight Zone.
From what I recall, didn't the original Twilight Zone take a lot of its plots from, like, classic science fiction, like, short stories? Or not even classic, but, like, good science fiction short stories of the time?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And then, presumably, they ran out of good science fiction short stories.
Yeah, and Rod Serling, creator of the original Twilight Zone, he was also the host guy, and he wrote a lot of the episodes. He was obviously, heavily influenced by people like Ray Bradbury, Ambrose Bierce, people like that. But he was also just an incredibly like passionate social sort of commentator, which is why so many of the Twilight Zone episodes have, you know, a social message or an underlying metaphorical message happening.
They weren't just in it to freak out some
Hey, you
teens.
can do both. This one does try and go for that. But, I mean, I've only seen this one episode of this iteration. This iteration aired it only had one season, 2002 to 2003. I may end up watching more episodes, though, because apparently there's an episode where Katherine Heigl plays a woman who goes back in time to kill baby Hitler.
Oh, always a quality, like, source of stories.
I think legally every sci-fi or Twilight Zone-esque kind of TV show has to deal with Hitler in some way. So yeah, obviously they did try to stay in keeping with the ethos of the original by tackling contemporary social issues, including one of the major influential episodes of the 60s version was an episode called The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. Yeah, for those who don't know, it was a bunch of people who live in a sort of a nice cul-de-sac street, and they all think that an alien invasion has caused a blackout in the street and that one of their neighbours is an alien. And apparently this 2000s iteration deals with that, but in a classic post 9/11 move, it obviously replaces aliens with terrorists. So one of the executive producers of this 2000s Twilight Zone is Ira Stephen Bear, who, if that name sounds familiar to people out there, Combs heads most likely. He was also an executive producer and writer for Deep Space Nine, obviously another major Combs vehicle.
Well, it was a space station, so maybe not a vehicle.
So this episode was directed by Jerry Levine, and I was looking at a picture of him and I went, why does he look familiar? And I realised it's because he was Styles in the 1980s Teen Wolf movie.
Okay.
He's the one that wears a t-shirt that says, "What are you looking at, dick nose?" And also he's really homophobic. But he's, sorry, the character in the film, not Jerry Levine. So it was written by Rebecca Swanson, who hasn't done a whole lot else, and Brent V. Friedman, who has some other connections to Jeff in that he wrote parts 1, 3, and the wraparound of 1993's Necronomicon Book of the Dead. And on a non-Jeff related note, this is more just a self-promotional note, possibly. He also wrote the script for a film called American Cyborg: Steel Warrior that we covered on another podcast that I'm a part of called Failure to Launch, where we look at failed TV pilots, from when we did our Summer of Joe Lara episodes, where we covered the astounding film career of B-movie actor Joe Lara.
We are so far off the beaten path of people I've heard of.
Even amongst people who watch bad movies, a lot of people still might not know Joe Lara. He's very interesting to watch. He died recently. Not that that's relevant, but anyway, our episodes on his movies are really funny, so go and check those out as well.
So this episode was called The Placebo Effect. And so it's medical themed. It starts following Dr. Leslie Coburn, who is from like the very first scene painted as this like extremely just positive. She's like 20. She's a doctor. She's respected. She walks into her clinic and adjusts the little letter on her name on the door. And initially I'd assumed that this was like her first day on the job, because that's how like, wow, hello
yeah.
world. I can't wait to do medicine. She was. But no, apparently she's been here for bloody years. She's just always peppy. Yeah, and all we really know about her is she's a doctor and she's nice.
Although
apparently.
I did notice that when she adjusts the letter on like the letterboard thing outside of the office, she adjusts it and it's still crooked. Like she just makes it crooked in a different way, but she's still happy about it.
Well, she's a doctor, not an engineer. You go into a clinic, it's all people with arms on slightly wrong.
Dr. Coburn is played by Sydney Tamir Portier, and you'd be right to think that name sounds familiar because she is the daughter of Sydney Portier, although she spells it with a Y, like the Australian city.
I was going to ask who she was, because she looks like the kind of person who'd be in stuff. She's quite charismatic.
She's done
Has she been in
of
much?
TV, and she's had a lot of regular roles, probably most notably on Veronica Mars and Chicago PD. She was also a regular in the 2008 Knight Rider reboot, which I didn't know was a thing. I did not know they rebooted Knight Rider. They'll reboot everything.
Don't you die on me. This IP's still
So
good.
you're right in saying that we're meant to think that she's A, nice, and B, very capable, because the first scene that we're introduced with her, she helps out a nurse who's trying to give a child a flu shot, and the child is like really resisting it. So Dr. Coburn starts going on about the kid's nails and her shoes and being like, "Oh, you're so pretty."
She gets her to hold her arm still to show her a finger.
I can't help but think that maybe that might be a good way to get our vaccination numbers up here in Melbourne, in Australia.
Just roam the streets being like, oh, can I see your nails?
You just
Yoink.
do it and then run away.
This is like the first scene where I was like, this nurse is trying to give this kid a flu shot and she's terrible at it. She's like manhandling this kid, trying to like physically stick her with a needle while the kid's flailing around. This nurse is not in the right line of work.
And the kid is like trying to kick the nurse in the stomach.
Like, this kid's about to get a needle in the face.
When we do meet Jeff's character, she does make fun of him. Like, she calls him names and stuff. And it's like, you've heard of bedside manner, right? But we do meet Jeff. We do meet Jeff really quickly. Yeah, he bursts in. He's very upset and he's desperately looking for Dr. Coburn. I guess that's his regular doctor. He is playing Harry Radich. He's wearing sunglasses, leather gloves. He's got a bag. He's very panicked, very sweaty.
He's doing classic Jeff. He's just bursts into the room in like a disheveled suit. I'm expecting him to be like, I got to see the president.
Coburn explains to one of the nurses that Harry is a classic hypochondriac and that he had TB as a kid and, quote, got used to all the attention. I don't think that's what hypochondria is.
I don't know. How do you get hypochondria?
I don't think it's hypochondria is necessarily enjoying the attention you get. I mean, that's a totally, like, that would be like Munchausen syndrome. Hypochondria would be a genuine psychological fear of being sick and dysmorphia and things like that. Like, anyway, the main issue in this episode is that Harry should be seeing a psychiatrist, not a GP. She says that because Harry never comes in with any, quote, real symptoms, she gives him a placebo every time. Every me and every you. And then later, after some stuff starts happening, it is only then that they suggest a psychiatrist. Well, he takes off his glasses and he shows that one of his eyes...
He's got a second pair of glasses underneath.
He has sunglasses on and then he's got his, like, prescription glasses underneath those. That's clunky. Just get prescription sunnies, mate. He does show that one of his eyes, the whites of his eyes, is completely red.
It's always a good sign.
Perfectly normal colour for your eye to be.
Classic hypochondria.
He also cuts himself with a scalpel, which is in an exam room for some reason. Wouldn't have thought scalpels are just lying around an exam room.
I guess sometimes they might need him to, take out some stitches or do something, but it seems like not great to just have it sitting there in the open. Jeffrey Combs goes for it. The doctor's kind of just like, oh, let's see where this goes. Stabs himself in the finger.
Well, yes, he's trying to show her that his blood doesn't clot. Most notably, he opens his shirt to reveal a series of horrible lesion lump sort of things on his chest.
It's like he's got bugs under his skin, but he doesn't. They're just weird, nasty lumps. Yeah, so Dr. Coburn's like, all right, I'm assuming this isn't your standard hypochondria. He's very panicked. She's a bit freaked out. She talks to the nurse, and the nurse once again is just like, fuck him. He's just a crazy guy. Just send him on his way. It's like, the guy's bleeding from the eyes. He's got lumps happening.
He's got buboes. At least look at him. God. Well, it's here that we get the classic Rod Serling Twilight Zone intro, except it's not Rod Serling, it's Forrest Whitaker.
Because he hosts the whole series, the whole 2000s series. Forrest Whitaker he's a solid actor. Yeah, I don't know what you want in a Twilight Zone host. I think he just didn't have a lot to work with here. All right, so I've got the narration here. It's Dr. Leslie Coburn has always treated Harry with a placebo, an imaginary cure for his imaginary illnesses. But what will this young doctor do when her patient contracts a real disease? A disease found only in the Twilight Zone. I feel like they kind of phoned that in.
That was something pretty common in the original series as well, where it was like, you had to take the issue and you had to somehow relate it to the Twilight Zone. So it would be like, even if it was just something like a fire, it'd have to be like a fire that burns with the flames of 1,000 logs which can only be found in trees that grow from the Twilight Zone. The interesting part of the new theme is that in a staggeringly odd choice, the music, the theme is done by Jonathan Davies from Korn. So it's this classic early 2000s nu metal thing, which sounds like this.
You're traveling to another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but mind. A journey into a
Yeah, I feel like with some things of this era, you can pinpoint them down to about the year, just based on how high people wear their jeans and which Korn song they're trying to reference at the time. The 2000s, the heady days. I was 12. Good times, good times. I played a lot of Lego. And so, okay, she's convinced something is wrong. She talks to this, like, other guy at the, she goes to, like, presumably the main part of the hospital. Who's the guy she talks to? He's, like, some more superior doctor.
I just assume that's, like, her boss.
Something's really wrong with this guy, and he brushes it off as well. He's like, fuck him. Give him some crazy pills. But okay, we'll run the tests. I love how they keep in this, and in fact, in a lot of things, they're always like, we're going to run tests. We're running tests. What did the tests say? The tests came back with nothing. They showed nothing. I'm like, tests at hospitals don't show nothing. They always show something. It just might not be something interesting. Like, we biopsied the tumors, didn't show anything. I'm like, it showed something. Like, is it just skin? Is the skin okay? Like, is it inflamed? What's the platelet count? Like, give me something.
You're right
here.
in that it's like the test would show something, but it wouldn't be like something like sexy and
No.
interesting and cool and fun.
The platelets are on the slightly higher side of normal, but that's within reasonable bounds, you know. Not seeing a lot of histamines. The audience is nodded off. We've only got 20 minutes. Come on, people.
But they do a bunch of tests, and like, yeah, blood work's normal, biopsies are fine. She's not sure what's going on. Again, her boss thinks he's a psychosomatic, and that's where he says you should refer him to a psychiatrist. Again, he absolutely should have also already been seeing a psychiatrist. You guys are bad at your jobs. You have a duty of care. Combs is doing a really good job at playing this slightly pathetic, sad kind of guy. Like he's quite scared as well at this point. Yeah, he's this, you know, very downtrodden guy who's obviously had a hard life, evidenced by this conversation.
I'd like to travel to some exotic locale. Budapest, Mozambique, Zanzibar. But I was always afraid of picking up some rare disease. You know, the sad fact is, I rarely leave my house anymore.
Yeah, he really does sell it quite well as this character who's like, you know, a bit of a weirdo. Everyone's like, oh, this guy's got some stuff going on, but you're still like, he is a relatable person. He's not just like some crazy person, which I think it quite easily could have been.
He's worried that he's given the disease to his housekeeper, and he says, the Black Plague started this way.
I don't know how that was rats and fleas and stuff. I don't know if they had a patient zero for the Black Plague.
I don't think you could possibly pin it down because, yeah, it was rats and fleas coming in from cargo ships through the Black Sea.
Where did they come from on the other side of the Black Sea? There was a housekeeper at some point. And also everyone, like, we're living in a pandemic age right now, and it is very strange seeing this guy in a hospital with, like, mystery, horrible illness, and everyone's just like, I'm just going to lean in real close and touch it with my bare hands and stuff. Let's all just breathe a lot of air right here. I'm like, put on some masks.
Yeah, there's very little PPE in this show. I really like the way that Harry says, Doctor, your optimism is contagious, and he has a sad little smile. It's very sweet.
And I'm there, like, trying to figure out the twist. I'm like, oh, maybe the optimism is contagious. That sounds like the kind of shit that could happen in the Twilight Zone.
So Harry is a bookseller. So Coburn thinks that maybe he picked something up from, like, a book that he ordered from overseas. I like the way Jeff's hair is stuck up in this point, and I'll post a screen cap. He looks very silly, but that's a deviation. Our first major twist, is Harry explains that his illness is related to a book, Mission to Zebulon. So yeah, Harry basically believes that his virus is not only from the book, but from another planet.
It's a virus described in the story. He doesn't think that it's necessarily come... Well, it's unclear what he believes, because the book is about some science fiction astronauts or whatever who catch a virus on an alien planet with the same symptoms that Harry has, which is bleeding and boils and then eventually bleeding out and death. And so Harry read the book like the night before and woke up with this creepy illness because he couldn't get the book out of his head, and he goes, oh no, it's the same disease. I think he thinks that the book is describing a real disease that he has, even though the book is clearly a work of fiction. And so and the doctor's gone, okay, this is weird. He's like, he can't have caught a real disease. This can't be a real disease. He must have, like, made it happen somehow psychosomatically.
Yeah, that's what's strange, is that eventually she surmises that Harry created this disease himself. But, because I initially thought that the twist was going to be that whoever read the book got the disease.
Magic book.
But then I was like, okay, but then people who wouldn't have read the book, they might have only just read the blurb, also got it.
Well, because the housekeeper bursts in after this scene and she's bleeding from the eyes. And she dies right there in front of them. She, bleeds and suffocates and dies. And the doctor, actually, she goes up, this woman is, just suffocated on the floor, and she pulls out a stethoscope, and she listens to her chest. She's like, she's dead. And I'm like, give her a fucking second! Do some CPR or something! Why are you listening to her heartbeat? She's just suffocated on the ground in front of you.
Yeah, she's bleeding from several orifices of her face. Why don't you go in with some, CPR life-saving type techniques?
This is what they teach us in doctor's college. It's why we have this thing. It just does it all. It's a medical tricorder.
It's like Doctor Who's sonic screwdriver. But yeah, so it turns out she does have the same illness. And then Coburn also notices that she too has the same lesions. Now she's taking it fucking seriously, isn't she? For the rest of this episode, or for the episode up to this point, she's only wearing a lab coat. And even after this point, she doesn't even wear a lab coat anymore. So the hospital goes into quarantine. They believe that it's a contact virus, not airborne.
A lot of guys in those suits from the second half of E.T., going around swabbing people. But they're still pretty chill about it. Dr. Coburn is still wandering around talking to people, going in and out of rooms. Jeffrey Combs has got plastic stuff around him, and she's just like, we're going to need you to go into, we'll see if it develops further, but we'll need to do some tests later. But, in the meantime, just wander about.
Even though we can apparently say for certain that it's not airborne, 2 hours after first contact, you can just wander around with zero PPE on. And even though Harry is in, full quarantine, he is surrounded by plastic sheets, and she just wanders in there. She's not even wearing gloves.
And all of the people in the waiting room are all still in the waiting room, and she's going in and out of the waiting room without a mask on, breathing presumably space Ebola everywhere. But it's easy for us to say, in hindsight, we know how to deal with this stuff. It was the early 2000s. It was a more innocent time.
I do like the way that Harry, when he's talking to Dr. Coburn, the way he leans his head on her shoulder. It's very sweet. Very
and he's sad because he gave her the virus, and she was like, he liked her. She was his friend. Yeah.
He says that she was the only one who ever respected him when he would come in with his various symptoms. I don't know if that's super true, but he felt like it was, so that's fine. As we mentioned, pretty soon that nurse starts showing symptoms as well, and they're all like, if we don't defeat the virus in the book, there's no hope. So Coburn's theory, as I said, is that Harry's imagination brought it out. So they're like, we'll use his imagination to make a cure.
That's right. She jumps right to Harry has manifested a physical virus that can infect other people using the power of his mind. And the other nurse is like, oh, it's a long shot.
But there's something to it.
Let's give it a crack.
They leap to magical thinking so quickly, but you've only got 20 minutes.
Looks at her watch, she goes, all right, let's do some shit. It's Twilight Zone time.
Well, thankfully, she notices an open newspaper lying right there with a headline saying that the previous night, when Harry would have been showing symptoms, there was a massive meteor shower. Meteor shower. Not meteor. It wasn't full of meat.
There was some kind of a shower.
Yeah. There was shit in the sky. That old
sparkly beef.
What is a meteor but sparkly beef in the sky?
She's like, he's manifested the disease. I need to get him to manifest the cure. I need to give him a placebo. But because this is a super crazy kind of story he's come up with, I'm going to need an equally convincingly crazy... The meteor... She can't just say, oh, we've heard of it and we can fix it with this pill. She goes, we're going to come up with some crazy shit. Jeffrey Combs, the cure has been discovered inside a meteor that crashed to Earth. And he's like, that's dumb as hell. Why would I believe... No, he doesn't say that.
His main issue really is that when Coburn starts telling him about the meteor, he starts freaking out about the meteor. He's like, oh,
Yeah.
I mean, meteors are bad, and, they wiped out the dinosaurs, and scientists say that a meteor strike in today's climate could cause a sudden new ice age. And Coburn's kind of trying to get him off that track, and she's like,
But
no,
also,
no.
that really bugged me, because it's like, yeah, a meteor wiped out the dinosaurs because it was a friggin' giant meteor. Meteors hit the Earth all the time, but tiny little ones. She was like, oh, it was up in North Dakota. They felt it as far as Arizona or whatever, she said. I feel like, obviously, Jeffrey Combs' character has a wildly inaccurate idea of how meteors work. That every meteor that strikes the Earth is an apocalyptic event. But also, I think the writers of the show, and maybe Dr. Coburn's character also are convinced that meteors never actually hit the Earth, and if they did, it would be terrible. But whatever, we'll move along. But in any case, she tells him that scientists have invented meteor magic goo, and she's got some with her right now. She's managed to put together a pretty cool little pelican case with a bottle of blue liquid.
Yeah, it's amazing how he actually believes it. Like, she says they found an element in the meteor that they think could be a cure. He doesn't ask any questions. Like, he gets one of the hazmat guys, comes with this blue liquid. It's got one dose in it, apparently, and it's like this bright blue liquid. Like, it doesn't look like anything I've ever taken.
The chain of events here is that a meteor crashed at the other end of America. They dug it up, they isolated the element, they turned it into a cure, they rushed it specifically to this hospital in the other end of America to give to Jeffrey Combs. What kind of government contacts does Dr. Coburn apparently got? It doesn't matter. She's a doctor. She can get this stuff done.
He doesn't seem to be incredulous at all at how quickly all of this has happened and how easily.
He's a little bit. They have to be like, don't worry about it. It's fine.
He's focused on the idea of this meteor strike, and he's
That's
like really,
right.
he's more worried about that because he's like, well, what does a cure matter if the world is, ruined outside? But eventually he takes it, and Coburn, she falls asleep. She's like, God, I hope this works. You need a nap after finding magical meteor juice.
Well, she made up the magical meteor. Yeah.
When she wakes up, Harry shows her that his lesions are all gone, his symptoms have all cleared up, and her symptoms and everyone else's symptoms are gone too. Everyone's really happy.
Presumably, Harry's cleaner is still dead, but, you win some, you lose some. We could speculate on how a psychosomatic virus would work. Maybe Harry has a natural immunity because he's a hypochondriac. His body's used to fighting off imaginary diseases all the time, whereas the housemaid doesn't have a good imagination, so she was defenseless.
But their optimism is short-lived when, because even though Harry's happy, he's still worried about the meteor strike. And he's right to be, because Coburn goes outside, and she sees that the city has frozen over.
Yeah. It is full, day after tomorrow stuff.
Harry, I guess, manifested an ice age. Not clear if it's, everywhere. Like how in Frozen, Elsa kind of creates, winter. But it's not clear how far the winter goes. Is the winter the whole world? Or is it just in her little, vaguely Scandinavian country?
Yeah, I think with Elsa, obviously her ice magic is limited to a degree. I think she can make a pretty big blizzard. I don't think she controls the world's climate. But you know what? They are never clear on that. And I would, for one, like Disney to specify how their magic works. I think she's already in a kind of a frosty place. I don't know. It's implied that Harry has destroyed... He's manifested this meteor event / new ice age with his mind, and so I'm assuming it's hit at least most of America. But I when I saw this was like, oh yeah, nah, he's destroyed the Earth. He's made a new ice age that's going to wipe out everyone on Earth.
I don't know. It doesn't look too bad. Is that a weird thing? It looks cold.
It looks pretty bad. It looks like the city's been snap frozen.
I don't know much about the Ice Age.
Just, it's a time when the world was cold. There've been a bunches of ice ages in history. I can talk about ice ages if you want. How much detail do you want me to go into? I mean, an ice age basically is just a really cold period of time.
What brings them on?
Global climate is always dependent on a whole bunch of stuff. It can be something like a meteor. It's usually not. But certainly if you get what happened with the dinosaurs, where you have the blanket of dust and and ash and stuff, like blocking out the skies. That'll fuck up your entire climate system if it's bad enough. And that can create an ice age. But obviously that is a random occurrence. What we get in the actual planet is regular ice ages, based on something called the Milankovitch cycles, which is little variations in the Earth's orbit. Because the Earth's orbit has regular variations. Sometimes it's a bit closer to the sun, and these happen over like a 10,000 year time scale. Sometimes it's a bit closer to the sun. Sometimes the tilt is a little different. Sometimes, there's 3 of them, and I've forgotten the other one. Anyway, it's the little wobbles in the orbit and stuff, and even though they have a smallish effect, they can kind of tip the Earth over into a different climate. But the important thing is you go into and out of ice ages very, very slowly. Like, it takes thousands of years unless something like a meteor happens or human-induced climate change, in which case it takes decades. But when these things happen over thousands of years, fucking so much stuff dies. But some things adapt and are woolly mammoths or whatever. But that's just geological time. I highly encourage everybody to look up major extinction events, because it's really cool learning about the Earth's all the crazy shit that's happened. And every time one of these things happens, everything dies.
Yeah, it's the Earth restarting its laptop. Just Control-Alt-Delete.
Yeah.
Starting again. I don't think that this episode... I just have no idea how this episode fares in terms of, the rest of this season. Because I know that this Twilight Zone, obviously, it only had 1 season because it didn't do, amazingly well. So I don't know if all of the episodes are this kind of a little bit silly.
It's not great, was it? I got to the end and I was like, that was a bit shit.
It was a bit ham-fisted. And, it could be that there's other episodes in this season that were a lot better. I don't think it has anything to do with the acting necessarily. I think everyone in it was pretty good. Obviously, Jeffrey was great.
He was. He nailed it.
Little scaredy boy.
I think honestly, it was the plot. The plot just wasn't very good. It's the thing of, this guy's manifested a disease because he's a hypochondriac. We've got to cure him by convincing him that. That's kind of cool, but it just didn't quite... I was never like, how they go. Maybe it was too predictable. Maybe I've seen this fear.
I think that maybe something that... And again, I'm going to compare it to the 60s Twilight Zone because that's my main frame of reference. And often that more contemporary things will go for quite high stakes. So in this, the stakes are literally the end of the world. And of course they did that in Twilight Zone. But often the original Twilight Zone, the stakes were lower but still worrying. But therefore it made it more believable. Sometimes the thing that was happening in whatever episode might only affect the person who it's related to. So it might be the story of one man who has one problem and it only affects him. Do you know?
Yeah. And it's just creepy for that person because you could imagine being that person with a weird little problem.
Yeah, and the bigger you make the problem in the episode, the less it can get a bit unwieldy and a bit silly.
And I think, the entire world being destroyed by a meteor wasn't even the problem of the episode. It was a little punchline twist just before the credits. And I think that is a silly thing a bit when you go... Because by then they'd had the twist. Oh, no, when we fixed it with the meteor, it's pretty... With the placebo.
A friend in need's a friend indeed. A friend with weed is better.
And then it's surprise, the world's being destroyed. It's kind of and he was Hitler.
Yeah, it's always Hitler. Turns out the Ice Age was Hitler.
You make the wacky twist too big and it's silly.
But it also means that because they were able to stop the virus by convincing Harry that he was cured, could they not now just convince Harry that there isn't an Ice Age and it would go away? Because it appears that the problem is in his own mind.
Yeah, maybe. I wonder how much of the damage has been done and how easy it is to convince him. I mean, I was thinking before we got to the Ice Age bit in this show, I was like, so Harry's a guy who can manifest lethal infectious diseases with his mind. don't let him leave this hospital. That guy is a walking biological weapon.
I mean, it's bizarre that it hasn't happened already. I mean, he has been a hypochondriac for a while, and then in very quick succession, he manifests a killer virus and an ice age.
Well, I mean, I don't know how it works. Maybe his powers have, like, only recently kicked in. Maybe he ate a bad hot dog or something.
So often the cause of people's magical powers.
I'm not going to speculate. Yeah, maybe he just came of age as a wizard. It's unclear why this has just started to happen. But I think that's fine. Like, hypochondriac suddenly, like, oh, it turns out he's got mind powers. But they don't really... And this always bugs me a bit in science fiction, where none of the characters really think about the implications of this. They go, we fixed that little problem. Harry's better. Let's move on with our lives. Not, this changes everything we know about the laws of physics. Also, we're all going to die.
I actually thought that the plot was going to be that because he read it in a book, that they would rewrite a book. So I thought that, which I'm sure I've seen before, and I can't quite remember what it is, but actually... I think it was in an episode of Futurama, which is possibly where my mind goes. But I thought that they were just going to have this idea that they would write a new book where the virus is cured, and then he would read it and he would manifest the cure in his brain. But obviously they wanted a more dramatic, apocalyptic ending.
You know what? I was thinking it would go somewhere like that as well. Or they'd, like, ring up the author and they'd be like, how were they going to fix the virus in the book? Like, because the characters in the book didn't cure the virus. They all died or something. There was no happy ending in the book. But I thought they were going to, like, do something book-related. And I'm a little happy they didn't, because I feel like there is a plot we've seen before. But yeah, I can't remember exactly where. I think it might just be something that happens a lot, where, like, thing in the book happens. Oh, no, gotta rewrite the book. I feel like that's Goosebumps. I liked the concept. I think I just didn't... Yeah, something about the execution. And maybe it's just hard in 20 minutes doing a cool thing without coming off as being, like, a bit silly.
Yeah, it is hard to do, and you know, there's definitely some episodes of the Twilight Zone, the original one, that are like a little bit silly. That's usually more due to the very poor levels of physical effects that they had for their monsters and aliens and such. I'll have to post some screen caps of some of my favorite alien and monster creatures from the original Twilight Zone, because man, 1959 was a hell of a time for production effects.
Yeah, a lot of rubber suits. Those are the days.
Yeah, I guess I'm interested in not why the Twilight Zone keeps getting rebooted every, generation or so, because it is such a good vehicle. I guess I'm always just curious as to who they aim it at, because the most recent iteration of Twilight Zone, which I've only seen a couple of episodes of, is Jordan Peele's Twilight Zone, which is definitely marketed more directly at people who like horror. Whereas this, I think, was going for just, I don't think it was going for necessarily like a horror audience or a sci-fi audience. I think they were like, it's a bit weird, eh?
I think there's sometimes a symptom of things where they put all their effort into getting the IP and getting a slot and getting Forrest Whitaker, and then they went, shit, we need some plots. we forgot to actually come up with a show. It's like they were so concerned over whether they could build Jurassic Park that they forgot to get any dinosaurs.
Well, I mean, in much the same way that the plot is the problem in this show, the dinosaurs were also the problem in Jurassic Park.
But you know what? If Jurassic Park had not had any dinosaurs, we wouldn't have got movies 2 through 4. So, and you know what? We would have been better for it. I don't know where this is going.
Some of the episodes of this 2002 iteration is... Alright, let's pick one at random. An orderly, Ethan Embry, suffering from blackouts, discovers his condition is the result of a police officer using his body to prevent an assassination attempt on the President of the United States and the First Daughter.
Why didn't we watch that one? That sounds like a rollicking adventure. Yeah, or some wacky shit. How about that, huh? Pretty fucked up, eh? In the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, Rod Serling just pointing at something fucked and just being like, oh,
whoa,
wow,
look at that guy.
That's fucked. That's messed up in the Twilight Zone.
You see the bit where it exploded the guy's head? It was like, whoa, imagine. Whew, bye.
Yeah, well, that's really what the Twilight Zone is, because, he's because you get the narrator at the start and at the end. It's kind of just, Rod Serling coming out and being like, look at this shit.
That's what I want. I want the Twilight Zone, but narrated by, like, a slightly incoherent, like, I got this fucking, whoa, man, look at this. And then it comes in at the end, he's like, whoa, right? Whoa.
That was fucked up.
Like, good science fiction is a bunch of crazy shit happens, and bad science fiction is a bunch of crazy shit happens. But the difference is why the crazy shit is happening and what kind of crazy shit what you're exploring with that crazy shit. That's my theory of crazy shit science fiction.
I guess there has to be something to tie it to reality, because otherwise, what would a person watching possibly get from it? Which I think is what people have liked about things like the Twilight Zone. And the original Twilight Zone was very good at creating these kind of... And they seem heavy-handed now with the benefit of... God, 60 years?
Yeah, what if instead of puberty, it was werewolves? Let's explore that. Sure, it might seem weird, but it makes you better at basketball. And people watching are like, oh, it's relatable. It's like, I'm the werewolf.
Finally, I understand puberty.
Yeah. Or like Jurassic Park it's not a movie about dinosaurs. Like, yes, it is a movie about dinosaurs, but you don't come away from it being like, oh, I've learned that dinosaurs are a bit shit. You come away from it going, oh, okay, maybe sometimes capitalism or crazy ideas are bad and need to be thought through, and that you should not do dinosaur theme parks sometimes.
Well, yeah, I think those are the two main thoughts that inevitably when you watch Jurassic Park come to you. One is that movie fucking kicks ass and dinosaurs are cool, and then two, wow, the hubris of capitalism is really out to destroy us all.
Don't fuck with forces beyond your control for tourism dollars.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, the main and most gruesome death is, of course, the blood-sucking lawyer, who's the most keen on, making money out of the place and not giving a shit and not respecting the dinosaurs.
Well, that said, I think Richard Hammond he's the one who's most gunning for the dinosaur park, and it was his idea, and he was the one having the bad ideas, but he's a kindly old man, so, he gets out of it okay. But he does not get his park endorsed by Sam Neill, which is a fate worse than death. Imagine Sam Neill disapproving of you.
I think I'd pass away immediately. I think if Sam Neill looked at me witheringly and said something even slightly critical of me, I would burst into flames. Oh, and imagine not being able to impress Jeff Goldblum with my park. Why? Why, Lord?
Then you turn around, there's Laura Dern, and she's like, you'd explode, you'd die.
No, Laura Dern, I want to be your friend. Yeah, so that's the Placebo Effect.
Yeah, what the real Placebo Effect is capitalism.
I think the main thing I took away from it is that placebo... still really good, and I should listen to more of them on a more regular basis.
Or maybe you can just have something that seems a lot like placebo, but isn't, and that will create the same effect in your audience.
Alright, Tom Lang, anything to plug?
I am doing my podcast every week, Not Good Enough. It's not just my podcast, I do it with several other excellent hosts, and we talk about what the F is going on in Australia. And honestly, there's always too much. There's always too much going on in Australia. Shit is mental all of the time. So check it out. We talk about it in an angry and funny way with plenty of weird references to Placebo and Jurassic Park.
Not Good Enough is a very good podcast. Even if you don't particularly know much about Australian politics, it obviously helps, but I think it's just a generally very interesting and funny podcast, and all of the hosts are very clever, well-researched, so it's not just a bunch of yahoos mouthing off at the establishment. This is This is
Stop
good.
it.
This is good work being done by good folks. I will argue that it does help if you're extremely online.
Yes, we are a bit too online. But I think it's like we're reporting from the front, you know, to the people who aren't necessarily as online as us.
Dispatches from not good enough.
Yes, we're under fire here, deep in enemy comments. The retweets are coming thick and fast. Well, yeah, thanks for having me on. This is always a good time. Always a good excuse to watch a little bit of weird science fiction.
I feel like you don't need an excuse to do that. I feel like you can just do that in your life, Tom, if you want to.
Sure, I could, but I don't. I need it to be homework.
There needs to be a lesson at the end, otherwise what's the point?
It needs to be, I need to have a podcast at the end. If there was a podcast that required me to do my dishes, I would do my dishes before that podcast. Not well before. I would probably leave it till the last minute, but, you know, they'd get done.
Well, the listeners don't know this, but Tom Lang should not be doing his dishes because he fucked up his hand royally last week doing his dishes.
I did. But I'm pretty sure that was a one-off. Those of you out there, ceramic is very sharp, and the back of your thumb is not so sharp. But modern medicine is pretty good. I went to that hospital, they gave me some blue goo, it fixed me right up.
Love that blue goo. Speaking of blue goo, never ever found a good segue for this, so maybe I should stop bothering, but you should bother to follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at ReanimatesPod, and follow it on Facebook, Reanimates Podcast, and Tumblr, Reanimates Podcast, and check out the episodes on YouTube. That's where they usually end up if you like listening to your podcast on there. I've heard some people do. Outrageous. And also the usual podcast stuff, like, subscribe, say hi, interact, I don't know, build a barn, do what you want to do with your life.
Say hi to your friends, call your mum.
Yeah. Maybe make like a really nice curry tonight. You know, just really treat yourself and make like a really nice warm meal for yourself.
You deserve it.